Hello, I'm Marshall Simpson with Magic Brewhouse Games. Welcome to our Oath of the Gatewatch Draft Archetype Review. I'm joined by Jeremy Edwards.
Yo.
And Lou DeSimone.
Hey, Marshall.
What's up, guys? So, we're going to be doing our archetype review for draft. So, we've got this format that we want to go over real fast. And we've kind of got it broken into the different archetypes by color. We're going to look at their style, their theme, and then we've got this rating system. So we're going to quickly talk about the rating system here. We've got 3 different categories. Those categories are synergy, exclusivity, and removal. Each of these we rate on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. Now, these are all based on our thoughts of the format. And this is a preliminary thing. The set has just come out, and we're just talking about it now, trying to get you ahead on the format. That's our goal here at Magic Brewhouse Games. We want to give you the upper leg. Guys, let's just go ahead and talk about synergy. What does that look like, Lou?
Synergy. So we noticed that some cards inherently played well together, such as the one-drop spells, either instants or sorceries that you find in blue commonly, or even in red when it comes to their spells, right? They usually have instants. One of them, Expedite, that you're not particularly a fan of. I happen to like in the Surge archetype, but that's a good example of a 1-mana spell that gives you a card, sets you up for Surge, and, is perfect. Causes the synergy there. So that's what we're talking about when we mean synergy. Mm-hmm. Exclusivity, as we move down the list of rating here, we took a look at how often do other archetypes and decks want that. If very few want it, exclusivity rating is higher. But if more cards want it, the exclusivity rating is lower. Mm-hmm. So it's not quite as exclusive. And really that's what we're trying to say here is that how many other people are fighting for your same cards when you're in the archetype.
Right.
And then, of course, really, if you're not looking at the quality of the removal, is it instant speed? Is it unconditional? How much does it cost? You're really doing something wrong. So we also took a look at the removal, and that really makes up the key points of our rating.
All right. Awesome. Thanks. So when we're looking at these scores, something that we'll notice as we go through is that the composite score, the average of the 3 grading areas, is going to be there's not going to be a huge difference between the lowest and the highest, right? And we're kind of making the point that, though we do think there are some archetypes that are better than others, that none of these archetypes are completely unplayable, right? You can play any of them. We just seem to come to an agreement that some are better than others, and that's going to happen in every format that you play in. One thing to note before we get started here is in Battle for Zendikar, the consensus was that green was the worst color.
The weakest, sure.
Yeah, the weakest. We'll put it that way. And as someone who is I'm not opposed to green. I did play it sometimes in Battle for Zendikar, and I did okay. And the same thing, we're kind of seeing similarities here in Oath of the Gatewatch. Jeremy, what to you sticks out as maybe the kind of the strongest color?
Strongest color has definitely got to be black. There are so many good removal cards in the color itself. If we're just talking about Oblivion Strike, 4-mana unconditional removal, down to Grasp of Darkness, 2 black mana instant speed removal, it's just a very solid color. And it seemed like, for the most part, when we're talking about different archetypes, black seemed to rate really high just because of how much removal it had for us. Mm-hmm.
So I think we do see that universally, but maybe we should get right into the first archetype if you're ready for that.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and jump in. Our first archetype is going to be Azorius. For those who are unaware, we are going to refer to these either as their Ravnica guilds, or we'll just call them as their colors. So for this one, Azorius is blue-white. We should have it listed so it'll be easy to keep up with it. So for blue-white, we've called this the style of the deck is tempo. and the themes are the Surge or Awaken. And on screen here you can see some key cards that we've laid out for this strategy. A few creatures dealing with Awaken. What do you guys think? What's your thoughts on Azorius and these cards we've got here?
If you can get a hold of some of these cards, you're going to have a pretty decent Azorius deck, if nothing else. Wall of Resurgence is probably, in my opinion, the greatest creature white uncommon in the set, hands down.
Well, just looking at the first two cards, they're both 2-for-1s.
Mm-hmm.
When you get Grip of the Royal, drawing a card, it replaces itself and it helps you out. Reflector Mage, if anybody's had a chance to play with that already, you know that setting back one of your opponent's creatures for that turn and the next one is pretty good.
I think at the pre-release we played and you got to play the Reflector Mage against me, and the game did not last much longer after that.
It's pretty good. I mean, it may not run away with the game, but certainly from a tempo style, it's right on the money.
All right. So just a quick look at the ratings here. We had the Synergy as a 4, just because though we acknowledge that Awaken and Surge are in these colors, Awaken isn't as prevalent in Oath as it was in BFZ. And so we kind of gave it a knock for that. And the Surge, it only gets half of the Surge cards, because Surge is really an is-it mechanic, and so it only gets the blue ones. So as far as Synergy, we said it's going to be a little lower on the Synergy scale. Exclusivity, you're fighting white for all that removal. And blue, black is also wanting several of your tempo cards and your bounce spells and things like your draw spells. So we gave it a 4 on exclusivity. And then the removal, because white is so strong, we gave it a 7, which is a pretty good number. That all levels out to a 5.
And I think that brings us to the fact that we didn't speak about Immolating Glare. Pretty darn good. 2 mana, remove target attacking creature.
I just contend that card speaks for itself, really.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? If a creature's not attacking, I think there's very few, right? There's the cohort mechanic that, would make that card less good, but it's still, if you're taking damage, for the most part, that's a thing. Jeremy, why don't you tell us about the Orzhov deck?
Well, the Orzhov deck is the ally life gain theme. There are a lot of good cohort cards in black and white. We have one of them listed here. If you look on the screen, we have the one that lets you draw a card for 1 life. At instant speed, that's a pretty good swing for us. As you can see, we've listed several removal cards being a part of this because it has access to pretty much all the best removal cards in the set. If we're going down to the Oblivion Strike, Isolation Zone isn't necessarily a super strong one, but it's still removal, and it'll still get their big fatty out the field. We just talked a little bit about Immolating Glare, and then, of course, Grasp of Darkness is just so solid at the 2-drop. You have anything else you want to add, Marshall?
Yeah, so I just want to talk about the style of deck that this is. This is your typical mid-range grindy deck. And as Jeremy mentioned, life gain is a huge part of this deck. But also, as you see on the screen, we went ahead and said life drain. We said that not only you're gaining life, there's cards that just drain your opponent of their own life. So that's the synergy there. But a lot of times, and I played this at pre-release, and a lot of times what just would happen is you'd get in the board state, they're stalled, and then you can't really swing in, and you want to block and that kind of thing, and then you can just sit there and just tap your allies down and do all kinds of fun things. And it's a really grindy mid-range deck. If you like that kind of thing, this is for you. I'm going to talk real quick about the rating. This got a 7, and spoiler alert, 7 is the highest rating that any of these decks got. But the Synergy is a 9, and I don't think we gave any other deck this high of a Synergy rating, just because of the ability to have all these allies and to block and tap them and do all these crazy things with the allies. But the exclusivity really took a hit here because black and white have the best removal in the format with Oblivion Strike and Emulating Glare and Grasp. I mean, these are just three
super premium removal.
Like everybody who's in those colors is picking them first.
Hey, I'm not even in those colors, and I want that. Right?
We did a draft just the other day, and what happened? I was right next to you, Lou. I was black, and you took all the removal before it could get to me. My deck turned out okay, but like I didn't even get second pick options at Oblivion Strike.
But I guess the important part about what you're saying is the exclusivity, and the reason why we rated it so low is because people, every single person who shares these two colors is fighting for your best cards.
Exactly.
Not every archetype is like this. You can, send the things around, they're going to wheel. Not here, right? These cards, ultra premium, and that's what.
And if you all go in with the mindset of playing black-white, more than likely you are going to get forced out of those colors, or you are going to be forcing other people out of those colors, so much to the point where a lot of your good picks were just taken as hate draft items later.
Yeah. And like we said, the removal's premium in this. It's a 10, and that puts a bow on it. So we're going to head to the next one, which is Boros, red-white. So this one is a much more aggressive deck. We have the theme of allies and equipment. It's interesting. We kind of had a little disagreement when it came to whether you should try to play equipment in this deck or not.
Well, there are a few premium equipment cards that you could possibly see, but for the most part, if you're playing red-white allies, you shouldn't be focusing on the equipment aspect of it. I mean, we have some of our rares that are pretty good for equipment, but, well, you're not going to see most of those rares because they're probably going to be taken first, or you're just not going to draw them. Like, that's just not something to expect. But they do have a lot of good cards for cohort, and they do have a lot of good allies. So just similar to what you can do with black and white, you can actually sometimes ping your opponents to death in a stalled out game. It's got a lot of good removal. Red isn't as strong as black for removal, but it's still got some pretty solid options.
And I know we're talking about Oath of the Gatewatch here, but when we look back to even one pack of Battle for Zendikar, the allies that you're going to get are just gigantic, huge boon to this deck. So I think when it comes to the ally theme and what you're going to get, very low to the ground, very aggressive, and I think it's spot on here.
You're right. When you're drafting this red-white ally aggro deck, you're setting yourself up for that third pack when you open BFC, because that's when you get the payoff. You get the Blade Master, the Double Strike guy. You get
Angelic Captain.
Maybe you get the rare Angelic Captain or Munda, or so you're getting these huge payoff cards in that set. So you want to you're fighting for these white removal spells, Immolating Glare.
One more thing I wanted to add real quick is several of these, when we were showcasing the cards, we just picked the top 5 cards that we could identify in those colors that happen in Oath. But for this one in particular, we see that there are 2 common cards. The Boulder Salvo and the Goblin Freerunner, those cards are just really, really good.
Yeah.
So, you'll notice that there's just a lot going on here. So, wrapping up here with the rating, synergy, the cards work together pretty well. Whether that's setting up your extra cards with Surge, your low casting cost. About half the decks want the cards that are in this one. It's not quite as contentious as black and white. But your removal between white and some of your direct damage and other options in red's pretty good. We gave it an 8. Overall rating is 6.7. This one's pretty high.
Pretty good rating. Next, we're going to move to Selesnya. Now, this is green-white. And we're going to move probably a little quicker through these now that you understand the rating system. And you're going to see a lot of repeating cards. There's Immolating Glare again. But so this green-white deck, this is a mid-range deck. Its themes revolve around support. So you're going to be wanting to put 1/1 counters on things. Now, for the ratings, I'm going to start here with removal. the removal here is a 6. Now, it doesn't get a whole lot from green. We've got, what is this card here?
Mrs. Judgment.
Mrs. Judgment, which is kind of like about as close to removal that green gets. It gets to support 2, and then one-sided fight ability with 2 of your creatures and 1 of theirs. So that's pretty good for green, but the removal here is dependent on white, as we see with our top 5 cards here. Now, if you can get your mid-range game really grindy, really slow, and get there, you can get some huge payoff with these big support cards.
Yeah, I think in its simplest form, this feels like the Outlast mechanic when it comes to just a little bit bigger, add some counters, and I think it's, typical of the white-green color combination.
Do we have anything else about this before we move on?
Well, going off the whole idea behind the Outlast mechanic, one thing makes me like this better than Outlast is the fact that I can do this, unless it's sorcery, obviously, at any time. So, we're talking about the captain here. Right? That's 6 mana whenever I feel like doing it to support 2. So I can even use it as a combat trick at times and force my opponent into some serious blocks or some serious attacks.
Or tend to be 2-for-1s built into creatures. It's a little bit slower, but to your point earlier, Marshall, it's your mid-range, typical, go just a little bit bigger in the long run. So.
Yeah. All right, next up we have Blue-Black Dimir. So this is our control deck of the format. It's kind of the only one that we've identified as this control archetype. The theme is devoid, so colorless. A lot of the cards in here tend to have devoid on them. So the synergy, when it comes to a control deck, most of the time in limited, there's not a lot of synergy. You just play cards that help you get to the late game and then play your big threat and just kind of take home the game. You play a lot of removals. You may play big creatures that block well, things like that. So the synergy isn't that important to this deck. You just want to play the best cards that help you control the game. The exclusivity, again, this has black in it. So the best black cards are going to be fought over in several different decks here. So we gave that a 4. Now the removal is very high. We gave it an 8 because of the black, and also blue kind of helps a lot with rolling waters. That's just a
Marshall's proverbial 4-for-1.
Listen, guys, that's a 4-for-1 every time.
and you know what? To your credit, Marshall, when we did the initial review, I felt like 7 mana was kind of a lot, but just seeing that it is the literal definition of backbreaking when you can draw 2 cards and bounce 2 of their guys.
Oh yeah.
Spending your turn doing that just doesn't suck.
Things like Oblivion Strike are great, and Grasp is good, but
4-for-1.
when I can get a Rolling Waters, I'm really excited. Jeremy, you tend to be kind of a blue-black guy. What do you think about this?
I like the card. I just always worry about my ability in the early game when you deal with decks that are so aggro like the Rakdos and the Boros that we have going, that getting to 7 mana might not be an option if you're relying on that card.
But I think that's where Spatial Contortion comes in, right?
Well, assuming you get your waste mana out properly. We have to consider, I love the colorless cards, and I love the fact that they actually make colorless its own color symbol now. But now we got to worry, okay, am I actually going to draw the cards to make this happen? Because blue-black doesn't have a whole lot of Scion creation, so you're going to have to draft some cards that will specifically ramp into waste if you don't actually get waste from your pack. I don't know if they're going to change that in the future where you can actually just use the wastes as a basic land all the time, but you actually have to pull those. And I saw, especially in the sealed on Saturday, I didn't get any waste in my first packs.
I think that a lot of the special lands produce waste, right? Or colorless. And I think that that's probably a good talking point that we hit at this juncture. Even though colorless is no color, in practical terms, we've kind of come to realize that it needs to be treated like a splash color. So even though it's no longer generic, right, you really need to be mindful that when you're doing this, balance out your stuff.
And just a capper on this, this is kind of one of the few decks that, this colorless is really important. There's some decks that you're like, I just don't need any colorless mana. This is one of them. Next up on our list is blue-red. This is a tempo, another tempo kind of like Azorius. It's a tempo deck. This one really has a lot of synergy with Surge, and that's why we gave it the 8 on the synergy rating. If you can play, a 2-drop and into a 3/3 flyer for 3 on turn 5, I think you're doing things. Yeah. I think you're doing real things with this deck. And to put on top of that, there's just not a lot of other decks that really love some of the cards in this archetype.
Reflected here are some of the best cards, right?
Yeah.
So these cards may be in contention, right? The Goblin Free Runner, but a card that's not going to be in contention by anybody else is the Storm Chaser Mage.
Right.
I mean,
for sure.
That's yours all the way. So
Monastery Swift Furious Flying, yeah!
Yeah, exactly. So we gave the exclusivity rating, a 6, which is, it's not crazy high, but it's definitely above average. And then the removal, we gave it a 7 because we like red removal. It's not the best. And then blue has some really good tempo plays for this deck. Now, we want to also be very clear that blue doesn't have removal like black has removal. It's got tempo, which is what this deck does.
Bounce,
Yeah.
tap, that sort of deal.
Yeah. And so all of that in mind, these are good cards for this deck. We gave this a 7. So tied for our best rating with black-white.
This looks like it's going to be a good one.
Looks like it's going to be a good one. Let's go ahead and go to our next Simic, blue-green. So we had a lot of trouble with this one, didn't we, guys? We dug through cards. We sifted. We really grinded it out to figure out what does blue-green want to do, and it was one of those things that was right on our nose. It does converge in Battle for Zendikar, and I think they want you to do something similar here, but it seems like it's even less supported.
Right, and I think we saw this in other, Modern Masters and other things. They usually have a multicolor, domain-esque, archetype, and in this case, it's the Simic archetype. They really want you to play multiple colors, all the fixings in green. You're supported with the, things that you do with Converge. So you're pretty much. What I don't like about this particular archetype is it's pretty much an all-in. You got to kind of go, okay, if I'm going to go this archetype, I'm just going to pick the bombs, whatever colors they are. I'm going to try and prioritize fixing over removal, because you're not. It's harder to do. So that's where you're at with this one.
One thing I want to say about this, and it's you look at Oath and you go, man, there's really not Converge cards. Not any payoff cards. And so you go, man, this archetype seems like it's not supported. And the cards that we have on the screen are all cards, with the exception of our Mr. Hexproof guy at the end with Flash, they're all cards that really just go to other decks that fit the colors, right? They're not Simic cards.
I want to actually disagree a little bit. I believe there is a lot more support than we're giving credit, because there are a lot of lands in both BFZ and Oath that will let you produce men of any color. Shimmering Grotto will set you back a turn, granted, but it will let you produce any color. We also have forget the name of the card, I think it's something Crossroads, basically the Springleaf Drum in the land. So when you get one of your small early creatures out, we can get men of any color. And we also have just a bunch of, we still have Evolving Wilds from Battle for Zendikar, which is, remind you, just a common. So we
perfectly to the point, this is a Converge deck, right? There's no other themes that jump out when it comes to this. Here's where you're just going to play the best cards you can get.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the less reliably good archetypes, but true to what we're saying, it is very exclusive, right? People aren't trying to fight you, with the exception of some of the better creatures that are on screen right now for your fixing and some of your other things, right?
Yeah, and so, with that in mind, synergy's low. We know that. In this rating, it's a 5. It's just a 5.
It's not easy being green.
It's not easy. It's not easy being red. Next up, we have red black. This is our Rakdos aggro deck. This is devoid like blue black is, but this is a drastically different deck. You're not controlling at all. You're kind of like just all out. I'm going to just try to do as much damage as I can in many different ways. This, like red-white allies, I think is a worse archetype than it was in BFZ. That's my opinion. I don't know if you guys agree. But I think maybe together there's enough pieces that this deck can be pretty good with the Battle for Zendikar pack. We gave the synergy a 7, so we thought it was pretty synergistic. The exclusivity, because your main cards here with black removal are going to be fought over, we gave it low exclusivity. But with that in mind, we didn't give it too low because these devoid aggressive creatures only fit in one deck. They don't go anywhere else. And since it's in black and red, the removal's pretty high. Do you guys have any thoughts before we go on?
Nope. Foot on the gas.
Nope.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, so next we have Golgari black-green. This deck, we gave the style of ramp. Really the only deck that we gave this particular style to. And the theme is Eldrazi ramp. So if you get some of the big payoff Eldrazi from BFZ or even from Oath with Inbringer or something like that, maybe a Kozilek, those cards are huge for this deck.
And there's tons of producers of Scions. They're not listed necessarily on the screen here.
Right.
Because we're just looking for the better cards in the format, which brings us to, Warping Whale. Marshall happens to, you hear him sighing in the background.
Guys, this card, come on.
Jeremy, do you want to talk first about that or what?
Okay, look, bottom line is, at its worst, it's creating a 1/1 sign for you to ramp with later. It's practically a one and done rampant growth. Because, yeah, you don't have that land afterwards, but it still produces a waste mana that it costs to use it. And, that Kozilek that you probably didn't pull is coming out, maybe thanks to that card at the end step. Yeah, and then, of course, we also have the situation where they have a big, beefy creature that happens to just have 1 toughness. Like, there's the 2-mana 3/1 who could be beating you in the face. That guy could get rid of it. And then, at worst, they try to Oblivion Strike your beefy creature like, I don't know, your Birthing Hulk, and you can just drop it off. Like, there are a lot of good removal spells that are just sorcery speed that make that card actually quite usable.
And I think, like you were saying about Birthing Hulk, it produces 2 Scions that happen to produce colorless mana. So you cast your Birthing Hulk, it seems like it's vulnerable, you've tapped out. Now all of a sudden they try and cast Oblivion Strike to remove him. You're like, sorry, I'm going to sacrifice my 2 Scions here, counter your sorcery speed spell.
You know what, guys? You make compelling arguments, but I still disagree. I hope some of our listeners disagree with you and let you have it in the comments. I really do.
Actually,
I hope they do.
Actually, no, I think that's a great point, right? If you guys have something you want to chime in on, Warping Whale, and especially how it relates to Limited, do you think that Jeremy and Lou are right, or do you think Marshall's right on this one?
Team Marshall. Let's go. All right. So that we give this deck a rating.
Team Edward.
We gave this Golgari deck a rating of 6. And our last deck of the video, we have green-red. So this is another mid-range deck. This one's probably a little different than the other mid-range decks we've had. It's also got landfall abilities in it. This deck might just have the biggest, beefiest creatures, naturally, of any deck.
I think notwithstanding the Eldrazi,
Sure, yeah.
This is clearly,
Yeah. Colored creatures.
right.
So the synergies here, it's got some decent synergies with landfall. It wants to ramp a little bit, not a whole lot, but you want to get those landfall triggers. Not the highest synergy we've seen, though. Now, the exclusivity. Nobody wants your green cards, so you're going to get as much green as you want. And removal, we gave it a 6 just because, red's pretty good. Green has almost no removal, though, so it's pretty low on the removal scale. And that leaves us with a total of a rating of 6.7, which is pretty high. I mean, do you guys think that maybe this deck isn't as good as our rating? Do you think our rating system has failed us here, or do you think this deck is real?
Not so much. Everybody comments about how green is one of the weaker colors in Limited, but because there are actually some pretty solid cards that came with Oath of the Gatewatch, I really feel like, it's not necessarily the best color, and it didn't really move up a rank, but it became a lot more usable as a color. Going back, you look at the black green, and you look at this deck, there are some really solid green cards that you can just pick up at the common and uncommon spot. So while everybody else is fighting for your black and your white for the removal spells, you can be picking up a really solid pull of red-green, so much to the point where your opponents might regret trying to fight with other people for those colors. So this could be a real sleeper in a limited tournament.
I think that's a good point, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the drafts shake out.
All right, well, that was our last archetype. That concludes the video. As always, thanks for watching. Tell us what your favorite archetype is. Comment in the
Comment section below. Sure.
Yeah, comment in the comment section below. We'd really love it if you subscribed. And until next time, we'll be starting up some magic.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.